Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah, and today I'm just gonna tell you guys what my favorite books for the year. I read probably close to 48 or so books, which is great. My goal for the year was 40. I beat my record last year, which was 35, I think, 30 or 35. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but for me, I just don't have a lot of time to read, so I felt really proud with the amount of books I read. Previously, before that, I was reading maybe like 2 books a year. So definitely made some strides and made reading more of a priority. So now we're going to go through my top 10 favorite regular fiction books of the year. So number 10 is going to be the one and only horror novel I read all year, and that is called The Troop by Nick Cutter. So this book was very difficult to read. It was very disturbing, and I talked a little bit about it in my vlog, which you can let's see more information on that there. But The Troop follows this man named Tim, who's a 40-year-old physician and also the Boy Scout leader for this troop of kids that he takes on a remote island up in Canada for their annual weekend camping trip. And it's a group of 5 14-year-old boys. They all have very strong and distinct personalities, kind of stereotyped if you ask me, but they all have these different personalities, and they're there to sort of like finish out their troop career. So the first night, they're all settled in, ready to go to bed, and there's a knock on the door, and the guy, Tim, discovers that there's a man that showed up on the island, and he's very thin, he's very sick, and he doesn't know what's wrong with him. So Tim sort of takes him in, and he tries to figure out how to help him. There's a struggle that ensues, and the man becomes unconscious, and things start to go from there. I'm not going to get too much into the plot, but basically the story revolves around this very contagious parasite that once it gets inside you, it just destroys the human body. So it was very gory, it was gross, it was so well written though in terms of descriptions and how the author used the sense of smell and foreshadowing within the story. It was so suspenseful, like you didn't know what was going to happen. It was disturbing. Trigger warning, huge trigger warning for animal abuse and disgusting body fluids. But overall, it was a book that I'll never forget. I read it during October and Halloween season, and it was really good. I did enjoy the story overall, and it made my list. So there you go. Next on my list is the only classic book that I finished this year, and that was called Lady Windermere's Fan by Oscar Wilde. And this is a really short play, and I listened to it on audio, and I think the experience of listening to it on audio was really what set it above for me. So it tells the story of this aristocratic couple, and there's a woman that comes into their lives, and there's a huge misunderstanding that ensues about the husband's intentions with this woman. So the main character is Lady Windermere. She has a fan, and they're throwing this party, and this other woman shows up, and it's so British, it's so classic, it was funny, it was cute. The audio was amazing because it was a full cast audio, and I think they did an incredible job with their voice acting and the sound effects. So the overall experience of it was really fun. So that's why that made my list. Next, we have a children's classic on my list. I have been working my way through the Chronicles of Narnia series. And I did read my favorite one that I've read this year, I have 2 left to go for next year, but was The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. So this book was really cute. I really like the world building, I think, the most in this book. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is always going to be my favorite so far, but The Voyage of the Dawn Treader was my next favorite. And Lucy is our main character from the original group of kids. And it just talks about Prince Caspian and how they have to go from island to island to try to recover these different lords that disappeared after the second book. So again, what I really loved about it was the descriptions and the world building and sort of the picture that it painted throughout the book. So I really enjoyed it for that aspect. So that made my list as well. Oh, I have to switch positions. My legs. Okay. So next on my list was a book called The Henna Artist, and this one was really, really good as well. I really enjoyed it. This was another book club book for me that I might never have picked up were it not for that pick for that particular month. So this follows this woman who is a henna artist, and she has a lot of really high-end clients that she's doing henna for. But she not only does their henna, she listens to them and she talks with them and she sort of counsels them, and she provides different herbal remedies for them. And it just talks about her experience and where she came from. And to be honest with you, it's been a while since I read this book, so the plot is sort of escaping me. But I do know that while I was reading it, I really enjoyed this story. I loved the audio narration. Her Indian accent was beautiful. She had a British accent as well, so she kind of switched back and forth to the Indian British and the Indian accent. And just the characters were really well done. It was a beautiful visual journey for me, how she painted the picture of what everything looked like. There's a little boy in there that he's sort of like an orphan, but he's there at helping the main character. And I really liked their relationship and his story about all of that. And it was just so good. I'm sorry, I'm not really describing the plot very well, but if you're interested in checking it out, I really recommend it. It made my top 10 books of the year list, so it was really good. And next we have my only romance that made the list, and this was called Beauty and the Billionaire by Jessica Clare. And Jessica Clare is a new author for me that I really enjoyed this year. So I read her 6-book series called The Billionaire Boys Club, and it focuses on this group of 6 friends that are all billionaires and their relationships and what happens within them. So the second book in the series, called Beauty and the Billionaire, focuses on a guy named Hunter and a woman named Gretchen. So this was kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because the main character, Hunter, when he was a child, he suffered a very awful accident which gave him scars and disfigurement on part of his face as well as his hand and parts of his body. I think it involved a boat, but he was in a really bad accident, and so he's this really like beefy, hunky guy, but he is so underconfident and quiet and reserved and like sort of shut off from love, that you just can't help but warm up to him and want the best for him. And he sees this woman named Gretchen, and he immediately falls for her. He's really, really attracted to her, but he's so shy and not able to do anything about it that he sort of like plots this way to get her into his home to like put together these love letters that have been found within the house. So it's all like prefabricated and it's all fake. So she gets hired to come in and be like this live-in editor to go through his stuff. So as they start to meet each other, she becomes more intrigued with him. So it is a romance erotica, so there's a lot of steamy scenes. But I just really liked the dynamic between these two characters. Gretchen was like a no BS, no bullshit type of girl. She was really a strong female character, and I just really loved her personality throughout the book. It was really fun, and it was just a really fun, different sort of romance book that I've ever read, and I really, really enjoyed it. Next, my favorite mystery thriller of the year was called The Woman in the Library. And this one was also really fun. This one I read as a physical book, so it was one of the only books that I actually physically read. And it was really cool because it was a book within a book, and it had multimedia aspect to it, because the story is about this woman named Hannah, who's an author. So Hannah is writing her own book, and she's sending each chapter to this guy named Leo for him to sort of edit. Hannah is from Australia, and her story is based in the United States. So she's sending it to this guy named Leo, who lives in the United States, so he can kind of give her a little bit of feedback as to, like, no, we would say it this way, or no, there's a restaurant in this location that you could use for your story. So it's like this collaboration between these two writers. So as Hannah is sending each chapter to Leo, we're reading the chapter along with him. So you're like reading this book, which is the main story, and then you're getting, at the beginning of each chapter, you're getting Leo's feedback to her. So the story that Hannah's writing is about this woman named Freddie, who's also a writer, and it takes place in the Boston Library at first, where this murder happens. Right when the murder happens, Freddie is with 3 other people. So it's sort of like a reverse closed circle mystery in terms of like the murder happens when everybody we know, all the suspects are within one place. So you know that whoever committed the murder was in the library at the time. So the story that Hannah's writing is about Freddie sort of investigating this crime and she's developing relationships with these 3 other people. And there's a love interest that goes on, which was really interesting. But just in getting Leo's feedback about each chapter was really cool as well. So it was a really interesting book. The murder mystery itself was really cool. I mean, I liked reading about it. I would say the first half of the book was a little bit hard for me to get into, but once we reached the middle of the book, things started moving really quickly and I could not put this book down. So it was a really interesting read. I enjoyed a lot about it. I liked Leo's perspective of each chapter a lot. He brought up some points that I kept thinking. Like one point he made was Hannah didn't really describe her characters very well, so it was sort of left open to interpretation of what each character looked like. We didn't know the race of the characters. There was one character in particular that she described a lot because it was the other female that had all these tattoos, and sort of got an idea of her, but everybody else, it was weird. And I kept thinking that, and then Leo brought it up. So it was kind of cool to see these intentional choices the real author made to really make you think about it all. I don't know. You'll have to check it out. It was a really fun read. I really enjoyed it. Okay, number 4 on my favorite books of the year was called Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And this book was my first Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I know she's a really popular author, and I know this book won the Best Historical Fiction award on Goodreads for 2021, so I think that's how I found out about it. But this book was really good too. This book tells the story of these 4 siblings whose father was a really famous musician, and it takes place in the 70s. So this is a dual timeline book, and we see, the main story we're reading about is from the perspective of the oldest daughter named Nina. And every year on the same day, they throw this huge party at Nina's house. So Nina has recently divorced, had a very public, high-profile divorce from her tennis player husband. So she's been having a really hard time with everything lately. And then she has 2 younger brothers and a younger sister. So we sort of like see the story from all 4 of their perspectives. But then we have a dual timeline that takes place in the 50s that talks about the relationship of their parents. So we have the musician dad, whose name is Mick Rivera, and then the mom. And it talks about how they met and fell in love and how their relationship went, and what it was like for the mom to be with this really famous musician, and what happened to them and what happened to the family. And then it all comes together in the end. So the timelines meet each other in the end. So this book, what I really liked about it was the relationship between the siblings. And I thought it was so heartwarming how they cared for each other so much. And it was just, I don't know, it was a really fun book. There were so many point of views, though. That kind of threw me off. I'm not used to reading books that have like multiple point of views, even from secondary characters. So once we get to the party, you start to see all these different viewpoints from all these different like sort of accessory characters as well. So I really enjoyed that. I had a great time reading that book. Number 3 on my favorite books of the year, and I don't know if this really counts because this was a reread, but I listened to it on audio for the first time, and that is what I really loved. So this is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. And Outlander is an older book, and I'm sure probably a lot of you may have read it before, so I don't need to get into the plot too much. But I will say that the experience of listening to Outlander on audio was really, really fun. The audio narrator is amazing. She did such a great job. She's an older woman, and she has a spot-on perfect Scottish accent, spot-on perfect British accent, and she made these characters come to life. I just think that she blew it out of the water. I was so impressed with this audiobook. It was so good. I love the story of Outlander already. It follows the story of Clare, who is a young woman in the 1940s who is on vacation with her husband Frank, and they go to the Scottish Highlands to reconnect after being separated from the war for so long. So they're trying to rekindle their marriage. So Claire ends up going out one day on a little adventure of her own, and she goes to a stone circle to collect some plants. And she gets sucked through the stone circle, and she wakes up 200 years earlier in the 1700s. She gets captured by this English soldier who's our main antagonist in the book. And she gets rescued by a group of Highland guys that are sort of on the run, or they're trying to avoid the British. So they save her. she in turn helps one of them out that has an injury, and they kind of accept her into their circle, and she goes to live in this Scottish castle and meets all these different people. All the while she's trying to escape to try to get back to the Stone Circle so she can try to get back to Frank and her life in the 1940s. So it just talks about all these things that happen. It's such a plot-driven and a character-driven book. I love the characters. I love the Jamie and Claire story, and I just really enjoyed listening to it on audio, and I'm going to keep going with the audio to catch myself up so I can read the next book in the series. Okay, and number 2 on my favorite books of the year list is Daisy Jones and the Six. So this was another Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I read this year. So I read 2 of her books, and they both made it within the top 5 of my favorite books. So this is definitely an author that I'm going to be checking out. So Daisy Jones and the Six was another amazing, incredible audiobook that I read this year. And it follows the story of Daisy, who's this young woman. She is an absolutely stunning, beautiful woman with an incredibly powerful singing voice. And it tells her story about how she decides to become a singer, and she joins a band called the Six. And they have all these relationships within the band. It's kind of like, people have said it kind of was inspired by the Stevie Nicks story and Fleetwood Mac, that kind of thing. But the book itself, the format of the book is like an oral history or an interview style. So if you're reading it, it looks like an interview. You see the character's name and then their dialogue. So there's a journalist who's writing sort of this oral history of this band, and that's what we get as the book. So when you listen to the audiobook, it says like Daisy, and then you hear Daisy's line, and then it says Billy, and you hear Billy's line. It's a full cast audio, so every single character has a different voice actor, and they're all pretty well-known actors. They just blew it out of the park. It was so good. It was so well done. The insights that Daisy has. Daisy is one of those characters that you start to really like her, and then she gets really annoying, and then you start to love her, and then you can't stand her. So that's kind of the dynamic I had with Daisy. But what I really loved was her struggle and her strength within the main relationship that she had within the book. It just broke my heart. I was sobbing throughout parts of this book. Taylor Jenkins Reid is such a good storyteller, and my heart just like broke so many times with this book. And I really liked how everything sort of wrapped up in the end. It was such a good book. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend the audio, as have many other people. So I hope you guys are able to check that out. So finally, my favorite book of the year was another book club book. My book club knocked it out of the park with these recommendations this year. I gotta switch, hold on. The arthritis. Okay, so this one was called All the Lonely People by Mike Gale. Oh, this book was so good. And I don't know if it was just the timing of when I read it and what I was going through in my own life, but this book just captured my heart from start to finish. And I'm going to try not to cry while I talk about it, but the story talks about this 85-year-old man named Hubert Bird, who is originally from Jamaica, and he ends up moving to the United Kingdom in order to find a better job and to find a better life. So it's a dual timeline. So the main part of the story talks about Hubert as an 84-year-old man. Something happens in his life that we don't know about yet that has caused him to be alone all the time. He doesn't want to see anybody. He doesn't want to have any friends. He goes to the store once in a while for groceries, but pretty much he stays alone by himself in his home. He's kind of ornery, grumpy, and there's only one person in his life that he likes, and it's his daughter, Rose. So Rose lives far away in Australia. She's a professor, and she calls him every week just to see how he's doing. So Hubert has sort of created this fake group of friends that he talks about with Rose so that she doesn't worry about him, and she knows that he's doing okay. He's a widower. And then we come to find out that Rose tells him she's coming home to visit. So now he starts panicking, and he's like, oh my gosh, she's going to find me out. She's going to know I'm lying. What am I going to do? Like, I have no friends. This is going to be awful. So he makes it this mission. He's like, I need to find some age-appropriate friends so that, Rose knows I'm not alone and she can still live her life without worrying about me. So he has this neighbor named Ashley, who's a 24-year-old woman who recently moves to the area with her young daughter, Layla, who's a couple years old. And she sort of like worms his way into his life. She loves him, she adores him, and she just wants to include him with everything. And he's very reluctant at first, but she slowly breaks him down. And they decide to create this club that tries to get rid of loneliness. Oh my gosh. So they gather these group of different people that also want to sort of campaign for this idea. And they come up with trying to find ways to stamp out loneliness within their community, because they understand and they realize that it's a huge problem. Ashley's lonely because she moved there all by herself without her family. Hubert's lonely because he's a widower. He doesn't have his wife there anymore. And then the other characters, they all have their own story for why they want to do this. So it's a project to stamp out loneliness. Oh my gosh. So the dual timeline, though, happens where we hear Hubert's story from when he first moved to the United Kingdom when he was in his 30s. So it talks about what it was like when he moved here. He got a job, all the struggles he had, when he met his wife, how they dealt with an interracial relationship, when he had kids and how much love he had for them, and the struggles he had with his son, and all of this stuff we're reading along. And then they finally come together in the end, and we find out the reason for his loneliness. And oh my gosh, it just, I don't know. Like I said, I think books can affect you differently based on what things are going on in your life. And this book really, it was so heartwarming, and it just the idea of people coming together and finding these unexpected friendships within the people right there and right around you, and how the universe will just provide that for you. If you ask, if you need help, if you need a friend, if you need love in your life, like I truly believe that the universe will move things and shift things, and you will get exactly what you need and exactly what you want. And I loved this book. And I think what really elevated the experience and made it top-notch #1 book for me this year was the audiobook. It was read by voice actor Ben something, but he did a phenomenal job. He really brought these characters to life, the accents, the mannerisms. I mean, the character of Hubert felt so alive and so real. And we just see Hubert's sense of self and his sense of confidence and his hope and his perseverance through all these struggles in his life, and his matter-of-fact just way. And then when you see him as an old man just totally given up, it breaks your heart. But it does have a happy ending. It's a wonderful book. I really hope you guys have a chance to check it out. Check out the audio. Listen to it while you're driving or you're doing chores. I loved it. I don't know. It wasn't the most exciting book in the world in terms of plot. It wasn't like some big epic fantasy or some cutesy romance, but it just really, really tore at my heartstrings and just made me feel love. And I don't know. I love older people, and just the whole thoughts about loneliness and what it does, and just people coming together. I really loved it. So there you have it, my favorite books of the year. I hope you guys had a great reading year. Thank you so much for anybody that has found me in my channel or have come over from my other channel. I really appreciate it, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you soon.